Some silences are louder than words, especially the silence after a phone stops ringing and never rings again. Robert Greene was the kind of man who believed in work, order, and discipline. A retired military officer with a stern jaw and even sterner rules, he had lived much of his life in straight lines. He believed in responsibility, not emotion. Logic, not tears. And for a long time, he believed that love was best shown through provision, not presence. His daughter, Claire, had always been a gentle contrast. Soft-spoken, artistic, full of emotion. She wrote poems at 12 and cried during movies at 15. Robert didn't understand her, and worse, he didn't try to. They hadn't spoken in nearly 10 years. Not since the argument. Not since he hung up that final time. And yet, every Sunday morning, Claire still called. Left voicemails, wrote emails that went unanswered. For years, her voice would echo into the void, hoping it would reach him. Until one Sunday. It didn't, single quotes, this is the story of a man who thought he had more time, of a daughter who gave love even when it wasn't returned, and of what happens when the clock finally runs out, leaving behind echoes, letters, and a chance for redemption that comes too late or just in time. Asterisk Robert Greene's Sunday mornings followed a strict rhythm: black coffee at 7 a.m., newspaper by 7:15, and silence by 7:30. The phone always rang at 8 o'clock, and every Sunday, he let it ring. The name Claire flashed across the screen, his daughter's name. He never answered. Not since their fight nearly a decade ago. It had started as a disagreement about Claire's career path: poetry. Of all things, N ended with bitter words and a slammed door. She left for college the next day. He hadn't seen her since. Still, she called. Every Sunday like clockwork. At first, he'd pick up and hang up immediately just to make a point. Then he started letting it ring. Eventually, he turned off the ringer altogether. But she never stopped calling. She's stubborn like her mother. He used to mutter to himself almost fondly. But he never told Claire that. Never said he was proud of her. Never said he missed her. He thought about writing a letter once on her 30th birthday, but the pen stayed capped. On this particular Sunday, the call didn't come. At first, he didn't notice. The silence just stretched a little longer than usual. By 8:15, he checked the phone. No missed call. No voicemail. Just stillness. For the first time in years, Robert felt disappointed. He tried to distract himself. Took his coffee outside, stared at the hedges. But something gnawed at him. He checked his voicemail anyway, just in case. And there it was. A message from the previous Sunday, still unread. He hadn't even realized she'd left one. He tapped. Play. Hi, Dad. I know you probably won't listen to this, but I'm calling anyway. I just wanted to say I'm moving. Far away this time. And I don't know if I'll be calling again. I guess I just needed to say goodbye in case you ever feel like listening. I love you, Dad. I always have. Even when you didn't want to hear it. Goodbye. Robert froze. The birds kept chirping outside. The coffee grew cold in his hand. The message repeated in his mind, word for word. I love you, Dad, even when you didn't want to hear it. He replayed it 3 times. By the 4th, he was already reaching for the phone, dialing her number for the first time in years. But it went straight to voicemail. He didn't leave a message. He wasn't ready. Not yet. Instead, he sat down in his old recliner, holding the phone in both hands, as if it might ring again. But it didn't. And that's when the silence stopped being peaceful and started feeling like punishment. Asterisk Robert hadn't realized how loud silence could be until that Sunday evening. It followed him from room to room. The old wooden floor creaked more than usual. The grandfather clock's ticking echoed through the hallway like a countdown. His house, once filled with the noises of a growing child, footsteps, laughter. The occasional slammed door now sounded like a shell. That voicemail kept replaying in his head. I don't know if I'll be calling again. He tried watching TV. He tried reading. Even dusted off a jigsaw puzzle he'd never finished. But none of it worked. His thoughts kept circling back to Claire. He hadn't looked at a picture of her in years. Most of them were packed away in boxes after she moved out. That night, he found himself in the attic, surrounded by yellowed photo albums and dusty plastic bins labeled Claire First Grade Middle School Summer Camp. He sat cross-legged on the floor, flipping through the pages. There she was, missing her 2 front teeth, wearing a lopsided birthday crown. Another one, hugging their golden retriever, Max. Then prom night, standing next to a boy whose name Robert couldn't remember but had once disapproved of. And finally, a picture from her college graduation that he hadn't attended. He stared at that last photo for a long time. She looked older, stronger, but there was something in her eyes, something soft and familiar. She had sent the picture in a Christmas card one year. He hadn't replied, hadn't even opened the envelope until months later. That was the pattern, wasn't it? She reached out. He pulled away. Robert stood and walked to her old room. It hadn't changed much. Her bookshelf was still full. The bed was neatly made. Her favorite poster, a faded image of a moonlit forest, still hung above the headboard, sitting on the edge of the bed. Robert finally let the weight of the years catch up with him. He remembered the arguments. The day she told him she wanted to be a poet, not a lawyer. He'd said it was a waste of an expensive education. She'd cried. He hadn't blinked. When she left, he let her go, convinced she'd come back once she saw reason. But she never came back. Only her voice did. Once a week, trying to close a gap he kept widening. And now she was gone. Maybe not forever, but enough to make him realize how easily forever could happen without warning. The next morning, he tried calling again. Voicemail. He tried again that afternoon. And again that night. Nothing. By the third day, he started worrying. He didn't know where she lived anymore. He didn't have any of her friends' numbers. She'd sent postcards over the years. Short ones. Read your favorite book again today. Miss you. But he'd thrown most of them away without reading past the first line. There was one, though. He remembered keeping. He found it wedged in a recipe book in the kitchen. It was from 3 years ago, postmarked from a small town in Oregon. This place reminds me of the camping trips we used to take. It said, "Hope you're well, love, Claire." It wasn't much, but it was something. That night, Robert booked a flight to Oregon. He didn't pack much. Just a change of clothes, her photo album, and a printed screenshot of that postcard. He wasn't sure what he would say when he found her, or even if she would want to see him. But for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about who was right or wrong. He was just thinking about her, and that, he figured, was a good place to start. Robert's plane touched down in Portland just after noon. He hadn't been on a flight in nearly 2 decades. The airport felt like another planet to many people. Too much motion. But he pressed on, quietly gripping the postcard Claire had once sent. On the back, in her neat cursive, she'd written, "This place reminds me of our camping trips, mountains, rivers, quiet nights. Hope you're well. Love, Claire." He rented a car and headed south. The town's name, Larchwood, was scribbled in the return address. He'd never heard of it, but the internet said it was a sleepy place tucked between the Cascades and the forest. It sounded like Claire. As the city thinned into pine-draped highways, Robert felt something he hadn't felt in years: nervous anticipation. Not anger, not guilt, but the hope that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't too late. 3 hours later, he drove past a wooden sign that read, "Welcome to Larchwood Est, 1889. The town looked like it had stopped aging somewhere in the 1970s. Small shops lined the single main street, bookstores, bakeries. A barber with an old-fashioned spinning pole. He parked near a coffee shop called Fern's, its windows decorated with dried flowers and poetry quotes. Inside, the smell of cinnamon and fresh espresso wrapped around him. A few people sat scattered across the room. A young woman behind the counter greeted him with a smile. "Can I help you?" Robert hesitated, then reached into his jacket and pulled out the postcard. "I'm looking for someone who might live here," said, sliding the card across the counter. The woman read it, her eyes softening. "Claire," she said, like the name was familiar. "Yeah, she comes in here sometimes. Quiet type. Writes in that corner booth with her tea and a notebook." Robert's breath caught. "Do you know where she lives?" She hesitated. "I'm not sure I should just give that out. I'm her father," he said quietly. The girl looked at him a moment longer, then nodded slowly. "She rents a cabin just outside town. I can draw you a map. It's not far." Robert's hands trembled slightly as he took the napkin she scribbled the directions on. Before leaving, he bought a chamomile tea, Claire's favorite tan, tucked it into the passenger seat. The road to her cabin wound through tall evergreens, the kind Claire had loved as a child. He remembered how she used to collect pine cones and line them up on the dashboard after their hikes. He had always thought it was silly, but now he wished he'd kept just one. Finally, he saw it. A small cabin with a tin roof tucked beneath a large cedar tree. A blue bike leaned against the porch. There were flower pots by the steps and a pair of rain boots beside the door. He sat in the car for a long time. What would he say? How do you explain a decade of silence in a single conversation? He stepped out, walked to the porch, and knocked. No answer. He waited, then knocked again. Still nothing. He looked around. Her car wasn't there. Maybe she was in town. He sat on the steps, the tea still warm in his hands. Minutes passed. The wind rustled through the trees. A squirrel darted across the yard. He closed his eyes and listened, and then a bike tire crunching gravel. He opened his eyes. Claire. She was older, now mid-30s. Hair pulled into a braid, a canvas tote slung over her shoulder. She stopped when she saw him, frozen in surprise. "Dad!" He stood, unsure whether to speak or step back. She approached slowly. "Weto, you doing here?" "I came to find you," he said, voice low. I got your voicemail." She blinked. "That was weeks ago." "I know," he nodded. "I should have come years ago, but I didn't. And I'm sorry." She looked down, lips tight. "You didn't even call." "I know," he said again. "You kept reaching out. And I kept shutting you out because I was stubborn, because I thought I knew best. But the truth is, I was scared of being wrong, of letting you see how much I missed you." There was a pause. Then, quietly, she asked, "Why now?" Robert held up the tea. "Because I heard your voice, and then it was gone. And I realized I'd spent more time trying to be right than trying to be your father." Tears welled in her eyes. "I waited for years," she whispered, "and when I stopped waiting, it hurt less." "I know," he said, voice cracking, "and I'll live with that. But I came here to tell you that if there's still space for me in your life, I'd like to try again, even if it's just small, even if it's just tea on the porch." Claire looked at him for a long time. Then, finally, she nodded. "Okay," she said softly. "Let's start there." And so, in the quiet of a forest town, with nothing but chamomile tea and a wooden porch between them, they began again. Asterisk, they sat on the porch. 2 steaming mugs between them, the silence stretching not awkward but fragile, like a glass that could break with a single wrong word. Claire curled her fingers around her cup, staring out at the trees. "It's strange," she said, her voice quiet. "I used to imagine this moment, what I'd say if you ever showed up." Robert didn't answer right away. He looked down at his hands, older now, worn with time and regrets. "And what did you imagine?" She smiled sadly. "That I'd yell, or cry, or slam the door. But now that you're here, I just feel tired." He nodded slowly. "That's fair." They sat in silence again. Crow cawed from somewhere up in the pines. Claire shifted in her seat. "After Mom died, everything just stopped. You barely looked at me. I didn't understand." Robert swallowed. "I didn't either. I thought I was protecting you by not showing emotion. That if I just kept going, kept quiet, it would pass. It didn't. No, it didn't." Claire's voice grew steadier. "I grieved alone. You were in the same house, but it felt like you were miles away. And when I tried to talk about her, you changed the subject." Robert closed his eyes as if shielding himself from the weight of her words. "I was selfish," he said. "I lost my wife. But you lost your mother, and I left you to figure it out alone. I'm so sorry for that, Claire." She looked at him finally. "I don't want you to be sorry. I want you to understand." "I do," he whispered. "Now, I do," Claire nodded, as if deciding something inside herself. "You know, I never stopped loving you. I just stopped expecting anything from you. That's what I want to change," he said. "Not by pretending everything's fine, but by showing up, like I should have years ago." They talked for hours about her life in Larchwood, how she taught creative writing at the community college, how she'd found solace in the woods and words. She told him about the book she was working on, how the protagonist was a girl trying to understand her father's silence. Robert laughed, a sad sort of laugh. "So I made it into fiction." Claire raised an eyebrow. "Barely fictional." He told her about the loneliness of the house after she left, the creak of her bedroom door, the voicemail she left on his birthday 2 years ago, the one he'd replayed 100 times but never answered. "I was ashamed," he admitted. "I didn't know how to fix something that had broken so slowly." "You don't fix it," Claire said. "You grow around it." As the sun began to dip behind the trees, she stood. "Come on," she said, motioning toward the forest path. "Behind her cabin, there's a trail I walk every evening. Helps clear my head." He hesitated, then stood, following her. The trail was quiet but full of life, birds calling, leaves rustling, the occasional crunch of their steps. Claire walked ahead, and Robert noticed how sure she was, how grown. He'd missed so much. After a while, she slowed and waited for him. "You know," she said, "this is the first time in over a decade I've walked this trail with someone." Robert looked at her. "I'm honored." She smiled, just a little. "You're not off the hook, you know? There's still a lot we have to talk about." "I don't expect forgiveness overnight," he said, "but I'm here. And I'm not leaving again." The wind shifted, cool and full of pine. They walked in step now, side by side, deeper into the woods and towards something new. Not perfect, but possible. A week later, Robert was still staying at the little cabin in the woods. Every morning he would wake up early, make a pot of coffee, and leave a cup for Claire on the windowsill. They didn't speak much, but his presence had quietly become part of her daily rhythm, silent, yet undeniable. One rainy afternoon, as tiny droplets slid down the glass window, Claire opened an old cabinet and pulled out a small wooden box, tied shut with a faded silver ribbon. "Dad," she said, "there's something I want to give you." Robert sat down at the table, moving slowly as his knees ached. His eyes quietly took in the box as Claire pushed it toward him. "What is it?" he asked. Claire hesitated. "They're letters I wrote to you after I left, but I never sent them." Robert said nothing, opening the lid. Inside were dozens of envelopes, the paper yellowed, some ink smudged with age. He picked up one letter, his hands trembling slightly. "I wrote almost every month that first year," Claire said softly. "When I missed you, when I was angry, when I needed you but didn't know how to reach you." Robert didn't read the letters aloud. He opened them one by one, and his eyes filled with tears. One was written on his birthday, another on the anniversary of her mother's death a year later. Same date, same silence, no one could reach. "I never sent them," Claire continued, eyes gazing out at the rain, "because I figured you probably wouldn't read them anyway." Robert gripped the letter in his hand. "Back then, maybe I wouldn't have," he said quietly. "But now I'll read every word." They sat there, an old man and his daughter, separated by years of silence and unspoken pain. But the letters began to bridge the gap. Claire didn't need an apology anymore. What she needed was her father to be present. And now he was. That night before bed, Claire noticed a soft light still on in the living room. She stepped out and found Robert sitting at the table, pen in hand, writing. "What are you doing?" she asked. He looked up, eyes misty. Writing a letter to your mother, he said. Tell her I finally found our daughter. Claire said nothing. She simply sat beside him. And in that silence, something between them healed. They didn't have to erase the past. They didn't need to rewrite it. All they had to do was accept it, forgive, okay? And move forward, dash together, asterisk sometimes. The words we never say become the heaviest. Ones we carry. A letter unsent. A call never made. A hug postponed until it's too late. But what if today you decided to change that? Claire and Robert's story reminds us that even decades of silence can be broken by a single act of honesty. A single letter, a single step toward healing. It's never too late to reach out. It's never too late to listen. Never too late to forgive. If you're watching this and thinking of someone you haven't spoken to in a long time, maybe a sibling, a parent, a child, or an old friend, take a moment. Write them something. You don't even have to send it. Write it. Let the words find their way to your heart. And then maybe they'll find a way to theirs, too. And if this story touched you in any way, please consider liking this video, subscribing to our channel, and sharing it with someone who might need a gentle reminder that love, no matter how quiet or distant, never really disappears. Here on Real Moments, we believe in stories that speak softly but carry deeply tales of real people, real pain, and real healing. So don't forget to hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story that could change how you see the world or your own past. And now we ask you, if you could send one letter to someone from your past, what would you say? Let us know in the comments. We're listening.